Okay, welcome to Ground Control. This is a re-review of the Radiolink Byme-D Gyro. I wanted to revisit this, and I wanted to test it out in the Z84 wing. It's a fantastic flying wing. I really only ever flown it with a standard receiver in it, so I wanted to put the Byme-D Gyro in it and take it out and test it. But I wanted to give you a couple of tips on what I do, with the setup on my Byme-D Gyro. The Byme-D Gyro is a 3-channel flight controller gyro. So it works in an Aileron only aircraft. So a wing, my GFS, F-22 mini and micro part jets, which are Aileron only. My Zeta Ultra Z Blaze 64mm EDF jet, which is Aileron only. I've got several aircraft that are Aileron only that I can use these in. Okay, so when you hook these up, your left Aileron is going to be connected to port 1. Your right Aileron is going to be connected to port 2. Your throttle is going to be connected to port 3. Port 4 is not used, and port 5 is for your SBUS or PPM receiver. It does require an SBUS or PPM receiver, the same as the Byme-A. And if you guys have watched any of my videos, you know I absolutely love the Byme-A gyro. Okay, so on the Byme-A and the Byme-D gyros, you can see that in the front of it, it's very flat, right? But on the back side of it, where the servo pins are connected to the board, there's a raised portion on the bottom of it. And so if you try to just mount this with that adhesive pad inside your aircraft, your gyro is going to be a little nose down. Okay, well, I don't like that. When I mount my gyro in the plane, I want it to be perfectly level to start with. So this is how I mounted this one in here, and this is the way I mount. I do something similar, maybe not the same material, but I do something similar whenever I mount one of these Byme gyros in. Okay, so you can see this is just a plastic handle that came off of a cardboard box, all right? And I kept it so that I could use this material. So you can see on this side, I've already cut part of it off. That's the material that I used for this installation. Okay, so you've got one side that's ribbed over here on this plastic, and I've got one side that's very smooth. So what I did was I just put the gyro on it with the pins extended past where the length of my little pedestal that I'm making for it, because I didn't want the pedestal to interfere with the servo connectors going on the pins. So I marked that, and I made the pedestal about 4 millimeters wider than the gyro, about 2 millimeters on either side wider than the gyro is. And then I marked that and I cut that little pedestal out. All right, then I took another section of this plastic. I cut it the same width as the original pedestal, and I cut it, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 millimeters, deep. And so I took that section and I glued it to the end of my pedestal. And the reason I did that was so that when I put the gyro on it with that little plastic piece, that little plastic platform basically that I put on the front, so that when I hot glued the gyro to the little plastic pedestal that I just fabricated, it's completely level. Okay, so, and that way if I ever have to take the gyro out, all I've got to do is peel the plastic platform off of the foam or off of the adhesive pad. I'm not having to pry the gyro out of it. So that way I've got a little plastic pedestal that the gyro is mounted on top of, and I just hot glue it to it. And it sets completely level on that little plastic pedestal. Now, the bottom side of this is smooth plastic, and that 3M adhesive anti-vibration pad that they send with it sticks awesome to slick plastic. So I attach that to the plastic, peel off the rest of the paper off of it, and then that's how I install it inside the plane, and that works out well. Like I said, I do that with all these Byme gyros. Maybe not exactly the same way, but the same process, maybe not the exact same material, but the same process. And that way when you install it, you know that it's going to be level inside your aircraft. Now, with the Byme-A and the Byme-D gyro, it has to be facing the right way, okay? The pins are always facing toward the tail of the aircraft. But you can mount it either right side up or you can mount it upside down. It will determine whether it's right side up or upside down when it initializes. The other tip for you, when you put it inside your aircraft, you can see that this wing, when it's sitting on its skids, it's nose high. Okay, well, I don't want the gyro when it initializes to think that this is level. I know that it says in the instructions that they want you to have the nose pointed up about 20 degrees when you initialize it. Okay, here's my suggestion. My suggestion is get your plane in the attitude that it's going to be in when it's straight and level flight. Make sure that it's level from wingtip to wingtip, and make sure that it's in the attitude, nose to tail, that it's going to be in when you're flying straight and level. And that's what I wanted with the wing. So I basically just put some material underneath the wing to hold the tail of it up in the attitude that it would be in for straight and level flight, and make sure my wings were level. Once I had that done, then I powered on the gyro. And you can recalibrate the gyro once it powers up with your transmitter by holding both sticks to the outer bottom corner. And you need to hold it in that position for over 3 seconds in order for the gyro to reinitialize, to recalibrate. And that's what I did. So I didn't hear it beep or anything, but if you keep an eye on the gyro when you're trying to recalibrate it, you'll see the LEDs flash on the gyro, and then you'll know that it's recalibrated. Okay, so I did that. All right, so now that I have it installed on the little plastic pedestal and it is level nose to tail, I put my aircraft in the position that it needed to be in for straight and level flight, and then I recalibrated the gyro again. So now this aircraft is ready to go out and test with the Byme-D gyro. So let's go out and throw it in the air, see how well the Byme-D gyro works in the Z84 wing, and then we'll come back and evaluate it. And I'll let you know where we go from there. I'll see you out in the field.
Okay, let's get this Z84 wing in the air with our Byme-D gyro. I currently have it in full stabilization mode. We'll see how that works out. All right, launching. Whoa, that took right off, guys. All right, it's keeping it nice and level. It looks like it's climbing ever so slightly. I have to get my position on the wing just so and recalibrate the gyro. Well, it doesn't seem to be climbing now. Maybe it was just because it was heading into the wind. Okay, so let's see here. All right, let's go full up. That's full up. That's full down. Oh yeah, I am getting a lot of oscillations there when I speed it up. Okay, I think I may have a solution to that. All right, let's try full left. That's pretty good. That's pretty good full left. All right, let's try full right. Let's see when it comes around here. Yeah, that's not too bad. You know, I thought it would be a lot more restrictive than that, but that's not too bad. All right, I want to bring it down the road here. Looks like I'm the only one out here this morning. That's awesome, because it's only 20 degrees out. Okay, you can see the oscillations pick up as I pick up speed. See that? Alright, so let's slow it down a little bit. It'll work good as a parachute. But my problem before was I had the Byme-D pushing the nose down quite a bit. And I just wonder if it wasn't recalibrating properly. This one seems to be doing just fine. Not a problem at all. Alright, so there's full left. Okay, now I'm going to put it in wind mitigation mode. Alright, so now we are in wind mitigation mode. No restriction. I just want to see if there's any oscillations in wind mitigation mode. I don't see any there. That was pretty good speed. We'll bring it down the road here again. Yeah, in wind mitigation mode it seems to be doing just fine. So in full stabilization mode, I'm just going to have to I think if I set up for the switch position, if I set it up so that there's less movement on the control surfaces, I think that will stop that oscillation. I have on, well, there goes some oscillation there, so I'm going to have to do it in wind mitigation mode too. But it seems to me, you know, on most of my planes, I have pretty high movement on my control surfaces. I usually have most of my planes set up. Yeah, there goes more oscillation. I usually have my planes set up so that there is pretty aggressive throws on the control surfaces, you know, for doing aerobatics. So I am going to have to put different control surface movements in for full stabilization mode and wind mitigation mode to prevent those oscillations on this wing, because I do have, like I said, I do have a lot of movement on those control surfaces, and I think that's what's causing the oscillations, is a very aggressive movement on the control surfaces. But and it doesn't seem to happen all the time. I think maybe when it hits some wind, it exacerbates it, you know? Yeah, I think that's what it is. So I think with really aggressive control surface movements, I think that when it actually hits some wind, it has to move those control surfaces to correct for wind. I think it's moving them a lot, you know, maybe as a percentage of the amount of movement, and that is, I think, what's causing the oscillations. Wow, my fingers are really getting cold. So when I get back to the hangar, I will input that programming for those switch positions for full stabilization mode and also for wind mitigation mode, and we will see if that cuts out the oscillations. And it just seems to do it. It seems to do it at speed, and when it is hitting some wind, you know, when it's got to do a quick correction for the wind. But I have a feeling that will solve that issue. Okay, so let's put it back into full stabilization mode. See if we can get it lined up over the landing area here. Bring it in for a landing. Wow, that is really going around. Did you see how slow that was? That was really holding it level. That was awesome. In full stabilization mode, man, it was really holding it. Look at that, I'm completely off the throttle. There we go. That gyro works really, really well on this wing for stabilizing it. I mean, all I did was I cut the throttle completely, and did you see how flat it stayed in the air when it was coming down? That certainly makes it a lot easier to land out here, because you can really slow it down before you touch down.
Okay, a couple of things I want to mention about the gyro before I get into the evaluation that I forgot to cover in the intro. There's a little black button on the very front of the gyro. If when you power up your gyro and you have it in full stabilization mode and then tilt your aircraft, you want to make sure that the gyro is correcting the control surfaces in the proper direction. If they're not, if they're correcting in the wrong direction, then one push of that little black button will change the direction for channel 1. Two presses of the black button will change the direction it's correcting for channel 2. When you're setting your aircraft up, even though it's an Aileron mixed aircraft, the gyro does the mixing for you. You just want to set it up as a normal 3-channel aircraft: throttle, aileron, and elevator. And don't do any Aileron mixing in your transmitter, because the gyro will do it for you. Also, make sure that if you have to make a phase adjustment on the gyro, that you go back and check your stick movement in manual mode, and in fully stabilized mode, and in wind mitigation mode. Make sure that the gyro is correcting the proper direction in fully stabilized mode and wind mitigation mode. And then make sure that your stick is moving everything in the proper direction in all 3 modes, including manual mode, before you launch your plane. Also, make sure that before you set up a gyro, receiver, an ESC, whatever, make sure that you have your prop removed from your aircraft before you do this, just to be on the safe side. One thing that I always check before I ever launch a plane in the air is that my failsafe is working. There has been times, depending on the receiver, that when I checked failsafe, all of a sudden the throttle, I shut off the radio, and all of a sudden the throttle kicks up anywhere from 50% to 100% throttle. Well, you don't want your prop attached when you do that. Make sure that everything is working properly, including your failsafe, before you put your prop back on. Also, if you don't have a way of creating a throttle lock or a throttle safety switch on your transmitter or your receiver, because I always set it up through my transmitter for all my aircraft. The only time that I have my throttle switch, my throttle safety switch off, is when I'm launching the plane, flying the plane, or landing the plane. Any other time I have my throttle safety switch engaged, so no matter how, if I accidentally bump my throttle stick, it's not going to engage the throttle. On channel 7 on the Byme-D gyro, you can use that to program a throttle lock. If you don't have a way of doing it on your transmitter or through your receiver, through channel 7, it's a 2-position switch. You can use a 3-position switch, just program 2 positions so that you can lock the throttle through the gyro if that's the way you want to do it, or if you don't have another way of doing it. Channel 7 is for the throttle lock feature. Channel 5 is for the gyro mode feature for fully stabilized wind mitigation manual mode. Okay. All right. I didn't realize that until I reviewed the video, but when I was launching the wing, you could see my shadow, and you could see that I was launching the wing by the wingtip. I haven't launched this from the belly since prop chewed up my hand. So from that point forward, which was a long time ago, I've been launching this by the wingtip. It has always felt awkward to me launching these planes by the wingtip. I got 3 or 4 planes that I launched by the wingtip, and I've never been comfortable doing that. But with some of them, that's, you know, if they got a prop on the back of them, I launch them by the wingtip. I don't launch them from the belly. So I never know what the launch is going to look like when I release that wingtip. I was so impressed with the Byme-D Gyro that as soon as I released that wingtip, the wing was completely level, wingtip to wingtip and nose to tail. It just took off so nice and straight. I think that is the best launch I've ever had with this wing. Now, that was because of the gyro. It wasn't because of me. But that really impressed me. When I was coming in for a landing, it kept the wing in the air so slow and so flat on its approach that, you know, I had to make a go around because I knew I was going to run out of runway. So I came back around. I tried to come in a little bit slower and cut the throttle a little bit faster because it was not under power when I was gliding in. The throttle was completely off. And I got it on the ground, but I almost ran out of runway again. So I was very impressed with the way the gyro helped me launch, and very impressed with the gyro in helping me land, because that was a nice soft landing when I touched down. So that was absolutely awesome. I noticed that whenever I throttled up, well, the first couple of times I throttled up, got up to speed, I didn't see any oscillations. But most of the time when I throttled up, and once it got up to speed of about 70 to 80% throttle, sometimes I saw some severe oscillations, especially if it hit a wind gust. And I think when I was talking about the remedy for that, I had it half right during the video. So here's what I think's going on, because I've had this wing set up forever and a day, and the configuration suits my flying style. Everything works as the way I want it to. It handles the way I want it to. So how often do you go in and check your configuration after you get your aircraft set up and working the way you want? I never go in and check that again, unless I want to go in and see how I did something previously. Maybe I'm setting up something similar to it. Then I might go in to look at configuration. So while I was out there, I did 2 or 3 more test flights on it. And I thought, well, what if I dial down my dual rate so that there's not so much deflection? So I tried that. That didn't work. Still had the oscillations. So I thought, well, what if I kick up my expo as well? So I kicked up my expo, put it in the air again. Didn't make any difference. Gyro doesn't care. The gyro doesn't seem to care what my dual rates or my expo are. It seems to me that the only thing the gyro cares about is how much swing is in that servo. So I went in and I looked at my configuration when I made those adjustments. And here's what I discovered. I have very little swing on my servo arms to get the amount of deflection on the control surfaces that I have on it. I only have 65% dual rate on my ailerons, and I only have 50% dual rate on my elevators. So, and with those dual rates, I can pull a very tight loop, and I can do a very fast roll with very little movement, very little swing in the servo arm. So here's what I think the remedy is. So what I'm going to do is go back to my setup file, the ones I post on our Facebook page, that has the amount of control surface deflection that I have for aileron and for elevator. I'm going to modify the linkage on my control surfaces so that I can set my dual rates for my aileron and my elevator as close to 100% as possible, and still get the same amount of deflection on the control surfaces. So there's a much larger swing on the servo arm than there is now, because I got a feeling what the gyro does is it takes a certain percentage of that total swing of that servo arm and uses that when it makes its corrections. If you've got very little movement, a very little bit of arc in that servo arm, when the gyro starts correcting, it starts chasing its tail. So you're flying along and all of a sudden a wind gust comes up and it tilts the plane to the left a little bit. Well, the gyro senses there's no input, to create that left bank. So it brings the right elevon up, the left elevon down to rotate it to the right. But because it takes so little movement of those servo arms to make those corrections, it overcorrects it and it rotates to the right. And then the gyro realizes, oh, well, now I got to correct to the left, and it creates a seesaw effect. Whether it's correcting roll or whether it's correcting pitch, because there's so little movement that I have in those servo arms. I think that's what's causing the oscillation. So I'm going to modify the linkage to get the largest amount of swing I can get on those servo arms and still give me the same amount of deflection that I currently have, so that my setup is not any different. You know, it's just going to make the controls a little softer. I think that is either going to greatly lessen the amount of oscillation that I'm seeing in it, or completely eliminate it. That's my theory anyway. So I will do that, and then we'll take it back out and we'll put it in the air again. And if that works, then I think that's the way I'm going to look at setting up my planes from now on, just in case I decide to put a gyro in them. Make sure that I've got the linkage set up so that I get the maximum movement of the servo arms while giving me the amount of deflection that I want, getting as close to 100% dual rate input in the radio as possible. And then I think if I do that, if I decide to put a gyro in a different plane later on, and that's the type of mechanical setup I have, I think it will work fine. So anyway, stay tuned for test flight 2 after I make those adjustments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.